I thought it was just a short visit, my nephew passing through town on his way to somewhere more important. But what happened over the course of a few days changed something deep in me. It reminded me how life can surprise you, how even the quietest connections can stir the soul and wake up parts of you that have long been asleep. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, before I begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this memory that stayed with me for years. All right, let me take you back to a week in late October. Cool enough for the leaves to crunch under your boots, but not yet cold enough to put the flannel sheets on the bed. I live alone in a quiet corner of Maryland, just off a winding road lined with sycamores, and that one old general store where the shelves lean like they're tired. It's the kind of place where people still wave to you from their porches, and if your car breaks down, someone will bring you a thermos of coffee while you wait. That particular Monday, I just finished making soup, my grandmother's recipe, loaded with barley, carrots, and beef so tender it practically falls apart before your spoon touches it. The house smelled like bay leaves and peppercorns. I remember I had an old jazz record playing in the background, one of those mellow saxophone tracks that feels like the audio version of a warm sweater. That's when I got the call. It was Marcus, my sister's boy. He's 27 now, but in my head, he's still that wiry little kid who used to dig holes in my backyard looking for pirate treasure. He was driving up from North Carolina and asked if he could crash at my place for a few nights before heading to a work retreat upstate. Of course I said yes. I hadn't seen him in almost 2 years, and to be honest, I was craving company. The kind where you don't have to clean up your thoughts too much. Family. Familiar. Even if they've grown into someone new. He arrived just after sunset, headlights sweeping across my porch like a signal from another world. I opened the door, and there he was, taller, broader, with a jawline that looked like it had been carved by time itself. But his eyes were the same. Kind, curious. That quick little smile that said he noticed things most people missed. "Auntie Val," he said, pulling me into a hug that was somehow both tight and gentle. "You smell like comfort food." I laughed, swatting his arm. "You smell like highway and coffee. Come on in." We sat down with steaming bowls of soup, the kind of meal that fills the silence better than words can. At first, our conversation tiptoed around the usual things: work, family updates, the way the world felt like it was speeding up while we all just tried to hold on. But as the hours wore on, something shifted. We moved from the kitchen to the living room, the lamplight soft and golden, casting long shadows on the walls, the kind of light that makes a space feel like it's listening. He asked me things I didn't expect, about what it was like being single at my age, about whether I ever felt lonely in this quiet house, about what I regretted, what I wished I'd done differently. And I surprised myself with how honest I was. Maybe it was the soup, or the weather, or just the rare comfort of being seen without being judged. I used to think life would feel more settled by now, I admitted, wrapping my hands around my mug, that I'd have it all figured out. But some days, it still feels like I'm waiting for something to begin. He looked at me for a long moment before nodding. "Me too," he said softly. "It's strange, isn't it? How we all carry that feeling, like there's still some page we haven't turned yet." It was quiet after that. Not awkward, just still. The kind of stillness that feels safe. He leaned back on the couch, eyes half closed, as the jazz faded into silence. "I think I needed this more than I knew," he murmured. I smiled at him, something soft blooming in my chest. "Me too, Marcus. Me too." And just like that, the ordinary visit turned into something more, something that would stay with me long after he'd gone. By the time morning came, the air had shifted. You know that kind of stillness when a house hasn't quite woken up yet? The light spills in like it's stretching, yawning across the floorboards, and you can hear the birds arguing in the trees out back. That's what I woke up to. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot, my robe pulled tight against the chill that snuck in overnight. I didn't want to wake Marcus, but I also didn't want to pretend like life wasn't happening just because someone else was in the house. So I set about making coffee, the kind you grind fresh and measure with care. Little rituals like that, they help anchor me. As it brewed, I looked out the kitchen window. The garden was starting to fade. Late October tends to do that. The last of the marigolds drooped, and the wind had tossed the leaves across the lawn like forgotten letters. I felt a little like that, too, scattered in places, bright in others, fading around the edges. I didn't hear him come in. "You still make it the old-fashioned way," Marcus said, his voice soft, like he didn't want to startle the morning. He was barefoot, too, wearing a plain gray t-shirt and flannel pants that looked like they hadn't seen an iron in years. He looked like someone between destinations, not lost, just paused. "I haven't changed much," I said, pouring him a cup. "Cream's in the fridge, sugar's in the blue jar. You remember." He smiled, and that smile had something in it. Warmth, yes, but also something unreadable, something thoughtful. "You'd be surprised what sticks," he said, taking the cup with both hands like it was more than just coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, the morning sun crawling slowly across the floor between us. For a while, we didn't talk. And it wasn't because we didn't have anything to say. It was because some silences are filled with memory, familiarity, trust. After breakfast, we went for a walk. I took him down to the creek that runs behind the neighborhood. It's not much, just a winding trickle through brush and old stone, but it was a place I used to bring him when he was small. Back then, he'd carry a stick like it was a sword, eyes wide with imaginary enemies in the undergrowth. This time we just walked. No swords, just leaves crunching underfoot and the smell of damp earth. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. I looked at him. Leaving where? Here, this place, the routine, starting over somewhere new. I laughed a little, not because it was funny, but because it surprised me. At my age, starting over's for the young. He shook his head. "I don't think starting over has an age, just a reason." We sat down on an old bench near the water, one that had seen better days. The creek bubbled beside us, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "I guess I don't know what I'd be starting toward," I admitted. "What would be waiting for me out there?" He didn't answer right away, just looked out at the water like it might hold some answer for both of us. "You've always felt like home to me," he said quietly. "Not just this house. You." I felt something catch in my chest, a breath I didn't know I was holding. It wasn't a romantic thing. It wasn't complicated like that. It was deeper, older. The kind of bond that grows slowly, like roots under a garden you forgot you planted. "That's a beautiful thing to say," I told him. "Thank you." That evening, we cooked together, something simple. Roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, a salad made from whatever hadn't gone soft in the crisper drawer. We moved around the kitchen like we'd done it 100 times, even though we hadn't. No bumping into each other. No awkward pauses. Just rhythm. Flow. Over dinner, we laughed more. Talked about childhood stories, the kind that only families can tell, the ones with layers and years wrapped around them. But between the laughter, there were still those quiet moments. A glance, a silence, a sense that something important was slowly taking shape between us. Not love, not like that, but recognition, reflection, a sense that in each other's presence we were allowed to be our full selves. No performances, no pretenses. After he went to bed, I sat alone on the porch for a while, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at the stars. They looked different somehow, like they'd moved just a little. I realized then that his visit wasn't just filling a gap in my week. It was stirring something long quiet in me, a part that still longed for connection, for purpose, for being needed in a way that was gentle and mutual. And in the quiet, I whispered, almost to myself, maybe it's not too late for something new. That night, I slept with the window open, letting the cool air in, letting the possibility in. Let me know if you're ready for what happened the next day, because that's when things started to shift in a way I truly didn't expect. The next morning began with the sky painted in soft shades of lavender and rose, the kind of sunrise that doesn't ask for attention, but quietly rewards those who notice. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, listening to the ticking of the old wall clock and the slow creak of the house settling into another day. Marcus wandered in about an hour later, hair tousled, stretching like someone who'd slept deep. He looked at me and smiled the way people do when they're still half in a dream. "Mornin', Auntie Val," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Mornin'," I replied, sliding the second mug toward him. "Hope you like the sunrise." He poured himself some coffee and leaned against the counter, sipping slowly. "Didn't see it," he said, "but I heard it in the way the birds were carrying on." We both chuckled, and it hit me again. How natural this all felt. Like he'd always belonged here, even though he never really had. After breakfast, he offered to help me clean out the old shed out back. I'd been putting it off for years. It was one of those tasks that lives permanently on the to-do list, quietly gathering dust and guilt. I hesitated, partly out of pride, partly because there was something private about the things stored in that shed. Boxes of old photographs, forgotten tools, memories packed away and ignored. But I said yes. Maybe because part of me wanted to share those things with someone. Maybe because I trusted him more than I realized. The air smelled like damp leaves and earth as we opened the creaky shed door. The hinges groaned like they didn't want to give up their secrets. Inside, it was darker than I remembered, the light slanting in through a broken window and landing in long golden stripes across the clutter. We worked in comfortable silence at first, pulling out boxes, sorting things into piles. He found a rusted birdcage, and I laughed when he held it up like a prize. "I think that belonged to my college roommate," I said. "She had a thing for parakeets and drama." He smiled, placing it gently on the discard pile. "There's a story behind everything in here, isn't there?" "Most things," I said, "but some stories I've forgotten, or buried." There was a pause then, thick with something unspoken. He turned toward me, wiping dust off his hands onto his jeans. "Auntie Val, can I ask you something kind of personal?" I nodded, even though my heart gave a small flutter. "Why did you never have kids of your own?" The question wasn't cruel. It wasn't even curious in the wrong way. It was gentle, real, and I felt it land softly but deeply. I sat down on an old wooden stool and looked out through the broken window for a moment before answering. "I always thought I'd get around to it," I said. "But life doesn't always wait for you to be ready." And then, well, I was waiting for the right person, the right time. You know how that goes. He nodded slowly, sitting across from me on a crate. "I used to think that made me selfish," I continued, "choosing a quieter life, a life for myself. But now, I think I was just afraid of doing it alone, afraid of not being enough. There was a long moment where he didn't say anything. And then, so softly it nearly broke me, he said, "You were always enough for me." That moment stayed between us like a candle flickering in a dark room. No big declarations. No dramatic music. Just two people holding the weight of something unspoken, finally given light. Later that afternoon, we made sandwiches and took them to the back porch. The sun was warmer than it had any right to be in October. Bees danced lazily around the last of the flowers, and the wind played softly in the trees. He told me about work, how he wasn't sure he wanted to stay in his field, how everything lately had started to feel hollow. He said he felt like he was constantly performing, like he had to prove himself just to stay in place. I listened, really listened, and when I answered, I didn't try to fix anything. I just let him know I heard him. "You don't have to know everything right now," I told him. "You just have to be willing to ask yourself what matters most." That night, after he'd gone to bed, I pulled out an old photo album from the shed and sat on the couch flipping through it. Pictures of family gatherings, my sister in her wild younger years, Marcus as a toddler with cheeks like apples and eyes that always looked like they were one step ahead. And there was me, too. Younger, sure, but somehow lonelier. Always at the edge of the frame. Always watching. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone in those photos. I looked toward the hallway where his door was closed and whispered, just to myself, maybe some things arrive exactly when you need them. And though I didn't yet know what the next day would bring, I knew something had shifted. Something real. Something lasting. The last morning started quietly, the way endings often do, without announcing themselves. The sunlight was softer that day, almost hesitant, filtering through the curtains in muted gold. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring out at the dew-covered yard, my hands wrapped around a warm mug, trying to soak in the moment before it slipped away. I could hear Marcus upstairs, the soft creak of the floorboards as he packed. We hadn't spoken much about him leaving, and part of me wondered if we were both avoiding it. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in when goodbye is nearby, not heavy exactly, but stretched thin, like it could tear with one wrong word. He came down a little after 9, dressed, backpack slung over one shoulder, keys in hand. "You heading out early?" I asked, trying to sound casual, even as something tugged behind my ribs. "Figured I'd beat traffic," he said, setting his bag down. "But I didn't want to leave without breakfast. And without talking to you." That last part made me turn and really look at him. He stood straighter now. Not stiff, but solid. Like something inside him had settled during his visit, just as something inside me had begun to stir. I made pancakes, my Sunday recipe, even though it was Thursday. We ate in that familiar rhythm, but there was a quietness to it. Not awkward, just aware. A knowing that time was running out. After we cleared the dishes, he stepped out onto the porch while I followed with our mugs. The trees were just starting to let go of their color, yellow leaves drifting down in slow-motion spirals. He leaned on the railing, staring out toward the woods beyond the yard. "I didn't expect this visit to mean so much," he said softly, not looking at me. I nodded. Neither did I. There was a pause, and then he turned toward me, his eyes holding something steady. "I think I came here looking for direction. Answers maybe, but I found something better." "What's that?" I asked. "Presence," he said. "A reminder of who I am, who I've always been, and how to just be without chasing or proving." His words landed deep in my chest, in that quiet place where truth lives. "I wasn't sure what I could offer you, Marcus," I admitted. I thought maybe I was just a stop on the way to something more important. He stepped closer then, not touching me, but near enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "You've always offered something important," he said. "Stability, honesty, love that doesn't ask for anything in return. Not everyone gets that, not even from their own parents." I felt my throat tighten. I reached for his hand, not out of habit, but because it felt necessary. He held mine gently, and we stood there like that, the autumn air around us, the wind picking up and scattering leaves across the porch like confetti from a life well lived. We didn't say much after that. Some things don't need repeating. When he finally got into his car, he rolled the window down and smiled at me. "I'll come back sooner next time," he said. "I'll hold you to that," I replied. He backed out of the driveway, turned down the lane, and was gone. Just like that. But he left something behind. That night, the house was quiet again, but not in the lonely way it had been before. There was a new weight to the silence, fuller somehow. Not emptiness, but space. Space for reflection, for breath, for memory. I sat on the couch with the photo album still open beside me. I looked at the picture of me holding Marcus when he was barely 3, both of us laughing, blurred by motion, and I whispered, "You grew up well." And maybe, just maybe, I had grown too. Not into something new, but into someone more fully myself. And I realized that being needed wasn't about being everything. It was about being present, open, and honest in the moments that matter. So if you're still watching, I want to say this. Don't underestimate the small visits, the quiet conversations, the time spent sitting still with someone who sees you. Sometimes those are the moments that change everything. Not loudly, not all at once, but deeply and forever. Thanks for being here with me. And if this story touched something in you, share it. Or better yet, call someone you've been meaning to reconnect with. You never know what it might stir awake. And before you go, don't forget to like the video, share your own story or thoughts in the comments, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more memories like this. I'll be here, waiting, with another story next time. Until then, be well, and stay open to the unexpected.